It had been a big lunch, more food than was needed. Most of it was fried. No doubt the leftovers would be packaged into small plastic containers and soon be sold at various local markets to tired workers on their way home or mamas who had found themselves with some unexpected vatu in their purses and would surprise their families that night with a fancy dinner. George presumed the catering manager would have prepared food sufficient for twice the audience and would be the one who profited from this nice little arrangement. It wouldn't be hard to do, especially when the catering bill was incorporated into a larger event being held at a tourist resort, paid for by a foreign government. George looked at the banner hanging at the back of the auditorium to remind himself. This time, it was the government of New Zealand paying. Last week, the Australians paid for lunch. 2 weeks before that, it had been the Chinese. Next week, he was attending a 3-day training course at the very same hotel he was standing in, being run by the European Union. He wasn't sure what it was about. If the geopolitical competition between China and the West for influence in the Pacific continued much longer, Sergeant George Long would soon be twice the weight he was when he first joined the Vanuatu National Police. Too many seminars, too much training, too much food. He wasn't sure when the actual policing was supposed to occur. Someone coughed. George looked over to where the sound had come from. Constable Jayline Ollie was staring at him. She was leaning against the wall to the side of the stage where George was standing. He could sense she wanted him to start his speech. George looked around. No one else seemed to care. 3 men sat in comfortable lounge chairs on the stage just behind him. The first of them was one of the deputy police commissioners. George didn't try to remember their names as they never seemed to stay long. If they were halfway competent, the police commissioner found a way to remove them to minimize the threat they might pose to his own tenure. If they were fully competent, which was more often the case, they were soon hired by one of the resorts that catered to international tourists as head of security, a job that often meant a doubling or more of their salary. He was talking on his phone, perhaps a job interview. The second was a diplomat from the New Zealand High Commission. George had tried to introduce himself at the start of the day, but the diplomat was more interested in ensuring the New Zealand signage was being positioned in such a way that it would be obvious who was paying for this. He was also on his phone, no doubt posting pictures of the event to the official New Zealand social media sites. He had to justify the cost of the lunch. The final man was Inspector Peter Kali, George's boss. He wasn't on his phone. He appeared to be sleeping. There was a 4th chair on the stage. It was empty. It was George's. The stage was makeshift, set in what the hotel grandly called the ballroom. George was pretty sure it had never hosted a ball. Some weddings, plenty of conferences, but never a ball. The room was much bigger than needed. In front of the makeshift stage, with 4 comfortable chairs and a podium, there were 60 chairs in neat lines of 10, with an aisle running down the middle. About half were being used, none on the first 2 rows. Another 100 chairs could have fitted easily, but that space was empty. The ceiling was quite high. George wasn't much good at estimating such things, but if he told someone it was 4 meters, he wouldn't feel foolish with such a guess. One lonely balloon was dancing along the roof, pushed around by the various air conditioning vents, its string too short to be reached by a cleaner on top of a ladder, so perhaps the roof was 5 meters high. George looked down at the notes he had prepared the night before. They were handwritten. He couldn't read them. He never had good handwriting, but when he'd prepared these notes, he'd been exhausted from a lack of sleep, so it was worse than usual. He realized it didn't matter. The 30 female police officers sitting in front of him didn't care what he was going to talk about. They had just eaten as much as they could and were taking their lead from the presenters on the stage, talking on their phones, texting, or sleeping.